I'm just trying to think. Like, do you think this is a little awkward?
Yeah, I mean, this whole 6 years has been a little awkward.
I just meant sitting on the same side of a couch together.
I mean, this is how you used to make me and Dave record. The couch was smaller than this.
Yeah, it was a love seat.
We were thigh to thigh.
You two put the love in love seat.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far.
Oh, we get a lot of shots. Everybody come to the net. We just have to get more and more pucks to the net.
Pucks on net. Pucks on net.
Putting pucks on net. We used to talk about in Vancouver getting pucks on net.
What were you saying about putting pucks on net?
Continue to put pucks on net.
Pucks on net!
Put pucks on net and get lucky sometime.
Pucks on net and driving and making a hard night on it.
Live on tape from my studio apartment, a stone's throw away from the Pump Jack in the West End. This is Pucks on Net, a Vancouver hockey podcast that doesn't talk about fantasy or fancy stats. It's me and P-Mac. We're sitting on the same side of a couch. We're shoulder to shoulder. We're having a very nice time. I think so.
You're really keen about sitting on the same side this time. We've never sat this close together in 10 years of friendship.
I just feel like we could change up the energy. Try
right.
something new.
Is the podcast that bad lately?
No, it's been perfectly fine. Man, I don't know about you, but I've been watching hockey for about I think I've watched hockey like the entire weekend, and I think I've got like 14 steps in the entire time. I don't know about you.
I mean, maybe not that much lack of movement, but yeah, I've watched a lot of hockey since round one has started. That's what you do in round one. There's a game on constantly.
That's true,
There's
yes.
2 games on constantly.
That being said, I want to thank you for joining us wherever you got us from. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at pucksonnetca or pucksnetca.
Who's rustling around in the bushes?
I don't know. That's my soundboard. And if you want to support the show monetarily, you can head on over to patreon.com/pucksonnet, where you can pledge a couple of bucks. And that being said, somebody did pledge a new...
The soundboard's sounding so much better this week. Like, you're not cutting Dave off.
Yeah, those clips of...
It's not a buck anymore.
Hey, come on. Give me a minute here.
That's how we pronounce it on the other side of the river, Paul.
This soundboard is so extensive.
Yeah, an a buck.
We got a new Patreon backer we want to thank this week. Grant McNeil, he pledged $5 to get instant access to all our bonus stuff, so we want to thank him.
Only $5.
He's doing his best. We don't know what his financial situation is, but to take 5 of your hard-earned dollars and give them to us, that's something else right there.
The real deal,
I think
McNeil.
if memory serves, Grant is from the island, and I think gas prices in Victoria are about $1.65 a liter. So
you are correct about that. Dave, a lot of upsets in the playoffs this week. You being on the show this week is most definitely not an upset.
No, was I ever really gone?
No, you have been here the whole time. From what I can gather, you just didn't have anything really interesting to say, or you didn't have anything to chime in last week.
Well, I felt like you guys kind of had everything covered for the last few weeks. I fully 100% agreed with everything that Paul said, which is just unusual. So I just didn't feel the need to pipe in with a rebuttal. Yeah, lots of upsets, kind of unprecedented, but at the same time, like jumping right into it with the Calgary thing. Are you guys really that surprised that Colorado took that thing in 5 games? Because I know by the playoff seeding we should be shocked, but it's nowhere near at the level of Tampa Bay and Colorado, or Tampa Bay and Columbus.
I'm starting to realize that everybody is complaining about the rankings or the seedings nowadays. For me, it is strictly about momentum, and you almost like people like Calgary was resting half their team in the week prior to the regular season. I'm at a point now where if I'm an esteemed hockey mind, which I am, and I'm running an NHL team, which it's just a matter of time before I will be, I'm saying, boys, coast between the trade deadline and the All-Star game, because you need to be playing meaningful hockey through the last 15, 20 games of the regular season. Because if you're not, you get absolutely destroyed by teams with cannons and bumblebees as their mascots. And it's just I was blown away by Tampa's efforts and by Calgary, the 2 teams that finished so easily in the regular season. I disagree with what that cat is saying on the webcam, but it's all about momentum, and it's mind-boggling this year.
Yeah,
I
I
picked
totally
Colorado.
agree.
I picked Colorado to win that series, and I don't know if I'd ever tell a team to coast. I mean, it might be better to get into the neighborhood of sitting some guys out in the middle of the season at the sign of
the season.
any injury.
The old Scotty Bowman, Nicholas Lidstrom constant injuries around late March, early April. But yeah, I'm with Paul. I don't think you tell a team to coast. But I had Colorado coming out on that series as well. I remember when somebody who was sitting to Paul's camera left wrote an article for the Pucks on Net saying you can't touch a flame when it's red hot. Classic 80s song.
I wrote that in September, by the way.
Oh, September. Well, I disagreed with it then, and I disagree with it now. I didn't see a team that had a playoff winning formula in there for one reason only, and that's goaltending.
Yeah, I was going to say they're close.
They didn't have a stopper.
But they don't have a goaltender. They're going to have to look at free agency because both their guys are up this summer, and there are a few names, and they'll likely be able to attract one of them to Calgary, but we'll see if it's a Bobrovsky or if it's a Peter Mrazek type of guy.
But then to throw in another monkey wrench in this Cowtown situation, and there are a lot of those going around because there are.
I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
There are a lot of unemployed people in the oil industry, so those wrenches are a dime a dozen in Calgary. But goaltending wasn't the problem. Mike Smith got the shutout in Game 1. He didn't have the best effort, but the problem was that immense scoring depth that they relied on all season, was non-existent. Johnny Hockey had about 14 tries in Game 5 to score a goal, and he didn't do a thing. And you talk I couldn't believe he already looks like a 12-year-old boy under a lot of pressure with too much stress. But he
kind of like Gordon Bombay in the beginning of Mighty Ducks.
Yes,
where he's got the penalty shot.
And that was Johnny Hockey. Sorry, that was John Hockey in Game 5. And it was like if he's not going to score, nobody's going to score.
Yeah, but a goaltender changes your mindset. When you've got an elite goalie back there, you play differently. You get more scoring chances because you're willing to take some liberties on the offensive side of the football, if you will. You're willing to go for that pass downfield. Football metaphors just to make Paul angry because he was agreeing with me. But
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, Dave.
I know you do play a different style of game when you've got a stopper back there. Now, I don't think they can go halfway with this. I think that Peter Mrazek is a fine goaltender, but they've had a lot of fine goaltenders since Kiprasov left. I think they got to send a message to the core of that team that the time to win is now, and they got to overpay for Bobrovsky. You got to believe they're going to have to go way over market value to get him to go. Now, the problem, where I thought you were going with this before you mentioned the wrench thing, which is also fair, and they just elected a government in there that's going to somehow magically change the price of oil, but they don't have the power to do that. But don't tell everybody in Alberta, or Berta, as they've officially changed the name now that the election results have come in. James Neal is an albatross of a contract. That it's got 45 years left on it at $6 million. It's worse. It's like the Eriksson deal on steroids.
Well,
it's bad.
The lifespan of that bad deal is the problem. I mean, we're in year 1, and he was supposed to come in and play that top line with Monahan and Gaudreau, and he didn't. And that badass trade with Carolina paid off. That's great, but you still have
that's the mulligan on that. Yes.
What do you do with this guy? And
I know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to go to Seattle. They're going to give them a ton of stuff so that Seattle does take him in the expansion draft, and then his career will be reborn in the Pacific Northwest.
He will rise like a kraken.
That's what's going to happen.
It's that's 2 years from now, though, Paulie. So they're going to miss the Bobrovsky boat, and then Monahan and Gaudreau will be 2 years longer into their deals. And
I'm not saying it's a perfect move, but that's what's going to happen.
I think
one scenario I could see playing out is that the Canucks and the Flames talk about bad deal for bad deal, but I wouldn't do that trade. I've heard that mentioned on the internet, but we're only a couple years through from being rid of Eriksson without having to buy him out. It's like we've put in our time for that social sciences degree. We can go work at Starbucks. The end is near. We don't want it now. Do I think James Neal could rebound with a team like Vancouver? Yeah, I think so. But do we have a guy like Tanner Pearson who's going to do the same thing at a fraction of the cost? Yes.
Tanner Pearson makes the lineup.
They won't be able to sign a goalie because they've got this idiot on their team who can't even crack the top 12 forward group.
Yeah.
Smith leaving gives them some money to work with. They'd have to move something else out, but he's making 4.5 or something. So I mean, there will be
heavy,
money
that's true.
that they can try to throw at Bobrovsky. Everyone seems to have said that he's going to Florida, and that's a done deal. I don't know about that, but the funny thing is,
I don't know about that either.
I think the most likely guy that winds up in Calgary next year is the guy sitting on the bench on the other side of that first round series. I think it's Varlamov.
That's a good point. Yeah, he's a pretty good goalie sitting on the bench. But again, they've had a lot of pretty good goalies.
Oh yeah, I don't think that that's the best, but after Bobrovsky, Varlamov's probably the second best guy, unless you like Jimmy Howard. But there aren't that many names of it. I like Mrazek more than Howard. I think Mrazek's had a really good year behind that, overachieving.
I think
Canes
Carolina's going to pay Mrazek, though. I think they're going to pay him.
They'll probably want to keep him around, but everything in Carolina is weird. Like they brought in Ferland, but they're not committed to re-signing him. Fair enough, he'll probably get overpaid wherever he goes. But yeah, Mrazek will ask for a lot of money this summer wherever he goes. And
do we have to go through another summer of Jimmy Benning holding us hostage, threatening to sign Michael Ferland? Because I can't go through that again.
There's a few hostage UFAs that we need to look out for. A handful of them.
That's a new term. Hostage UFA.
Just don't touch him. Just don't touch Tyler Myers. Just don't touch Michael Ferland.
We're going to sign Jake Gardner. We're going to sign him. You watch.
Gardner's like the least offensive of those three. Not that I'm pushing for him to come to Vancouver by any means, but like there's a lot of guys that's like, I wouldn't mind having him on the team, but they're going to get paid twice what they should.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that are hostage UFAs in Winnipeg, which allegedly there's now a rift in the room. And Dave, you brought up a very good point about it's never good when there's player only meetings right before the playoffs. And
that's a bad sign.
And now that's becoming a legitimate talking point in the aftermath of the Winnipeg Jets, not giving a fuck and getting it wound up in 6.
They lost the last 7 home games, playoffs and regular season combined. That's a horrible sign for a team that was that good for that long. They screwed up their chemistry a little bit, I think. They brought in Hayes. They made some changes to the lineup I don't think they needed to make. And they just gave up. Like when you get 6 shots in the first 2 periods of an elimination game, I don't know what else you could call that. As well as St. Louis is playing, like you got a talented team there with Nick Ehlers and Patrick Laine. The rift, I suspect, is coming from between the coaching staff and the elite players, the core of that team. Apparently, Patrick Laine played like the entire season with a bad groin, and they didn't shut him down. What kind of fucking player management is that? What kind of management of your assets is that, where you would let a guy that good, when your team is that good, play that injured for that long? That's ridiculous.
Well, and they marvel, just like the Flames, how much depth the Winnipeg Jets have, to the point that on this very show earlier in the year, we go, you know what? If somebody offer sheeted Patrick Laine, they'd have the depth to, still
let
compete.
him go.
So you have a guy that is supposed to be your elite goal scorer, regardless of what line he's playing on. But the fact that he's like, speculation that there's a 90% chance he shouldn't have played, or however you want to phrase it. Yeah, that's a terrible way to manage your superstars.
And he's not having a good year, so it's not like you're pulling him off some record-setting.
Yeah.
As soon as he shows signs of wear and tear, like they should have sat him, because you don't need him in the regular season with a team like that.
You're going to make the playoffs, and you have studs playing behind him. It just didn't make any sense to me. And Nikolai Ehlers, though, I think is another guy who's a candidate for leaving Winnipeg. His playoff numbers career are atrocious. These are not fancy stats. These are regular ass, anybody can read him stats. He's got like 1 goal in 21 playoff games.
Yeah, he's like he's the Nikita Kucherov of the North.
He's the Kucherov of the North. Yeah, well, we Tampa, you guys did like a whole episode. I just sat there. I didn't say anything.
And the Patreon show, you were silent for that one too.
Yeah, I like to watch. That's my new thing.
But yeah,
there are pieces they can rebound. I think Jacob Troup has played his last game as a Winnipeg Jet. I think he's gone at the end of the season. So there'll be a superstar shakeup, if you will, in Winnipeg. Connor Hellebuyck is untouchable, and Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler, and then the rest, I think. Bufflin, I think you keep because he's heart and soul.
He was their best player in the playoffs, and not just point production, but he was great. But Jacob Trouba, he was an RFA. He sat out. He took the discount to win now with Winnipeg, and they're not getting the job done. And you have this alleged situation brewing behind the scenes. Like, why would he want to stay there?
You don't. But you could make a deal, kind of a Shea Weber for PK Subban deal, if you will. You could find, because you still need that asset. Like, there's such a deep team that, like, you wouldn't, be trading a guy like Trouba without wanting to plug the hole that he would be making. So maybe they find a team that also wants to shake things up a little bit, and they go just like right D for right D. They go Trouba for a Trouba-esque player who also struggled somewhere else. You know who was really, really bad, unapologetically bad in the playoffs this year was Dougie Hamilton.
Is he?
Maybe there's a deal to be made there.
I mean, well, the thing is, April showers, spring flowers, trade for Dougie Hamilton in June seems to be the yearly trend.
Yes.
And
he likes to go where all the good museums are.
Yeah, and
he's seen everything in Raleigh. Now he's got to go to Winnipeg.
There's a lot of good Royal Canadian Air Force museums.
Yeah, Paulie spent quite a bit of time there. You could send him an email, right, Paul?
Yeah, I think the Air Force, that might be, is that? Oh, yeah, I guess that is Winnipeg.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's probably a good Manitoba, Natural History Museum. There's a lot there for Dougie to really sink his teeth into.
Did you guys see him pull up on that, on the trains come and play where the puck got dumped into the Washington zone and Ovechkin was coming and he just pulled right up, let him take the puck, throw it in front. It was one of the best. That was one of the most chicken shit things I've ever seen. Although, from like a logistical standpoint, I don't blame him. Like after what he did to Svechnikov, I wouldn't want to mess with him either. But like, if there was ever if you were going into arbitration with a player to negotiate a deal, if I was a GM, I would just show that as a GIF, just looped.
Just a GIF, not even a video, just one GIF.
One GIF. This is why you're not worth this money, Dougie. And I honestly think that that's a big enough mistake. I know it's one game and one play, but it was so egregious and so obvious that that's a trade material. I wouldn't be surprised. It's pure speculation. I haven't heard anything, but a Trouba for Hamilton trade makes sense for both players and both teams.
I kind of like that. Yeah.
Trouba is an RFA right now, so that is what it is.
A sign. Yeah, it would have to probably be a sign and. Who knows?
Are you going to Carolina? Do you like to dance? Man, have we got a deal for you. Dougie, it's step, turn, pivot, pause. It's important that you know this. It's as important as the power play. We're doing the Macarena tonight.
3 syllables, slap leather. All right, good to go. I quite like that pull-off and that avoid Ovechkin because it's still a reminder that intimidation and fear is still a very big part in the game today, and especially in the playoffs. And when Alex Ovechkin, he sent his message early that please do not mess with me. I am none to be. I'm not one to be taken kindly or taken lightly. He did apologize to Svechnikov. Svechnikov said that he called him after the game and apologized after knocking him on his ass. So I thought that was quite a nice gesture. And then also in that series, Tom Wilson somehow 0 penalty minutes through 5 games while having 2 goals and 2 assists. And I just think that's quite an impressive banter stat. That's all I got on that.
They're playing now, aren't they? Isn't that game on right now as we're recording this?
Yeah, we got the game up on the mantle here, and we'll go to the Pucks on that out-of-town scoreboard if any events happen. Because God knows, if you're riding transit or driving to work on a Thursday morning, you want to hear live updates of a game that happened on Monday night.
It's just good radio.
I watched a hell of a good game against Toronto versus Boston yesterday, and that's turned
Yes, I also watched that game. I watched that in Don Cherry, Kirk Muller, Doug Gilmour, and Gord Downey's hometown of Kingston, Ontario.
How Canadian did you feel doing that there?
Felt pretty Canadian. It was the basement of Allen's house is a shrine to obscure Montreal Canadiens. Who has a framed Joe Juno picture in their house? He listens to the show, so he's going to hear this and take an issue with that. But it's, I didn't ask it at the time. I'm asking him publicly now. There's got to be a story behind it. Do you know him? Does he work for you now? What's Joe Juno up to? Is he cutting your lawn?
I once got actually, not even me. I once made my father wait in line at Save On Foods to get Trent Klatt's autograph on a Canucks jersey. And then I'm like, I still want to wear the jersey, and I washed it. I also might have done the same thing with the Matt Cook autograph, but that's just me.
One time, Craig had made a $50 investment and bought an official CFL football, like a real leather CFL football.
Yeah.
And before they had the all-weather field installed at their practice facility in Surrey, once in a while you'd just be walking your dog in the athletic park in Cloverdale, and the BC Lions would be practicing on the all-weather field. That shows how CFL things are, right? They probably got kicked off because they didn't officially rent it, and some youth soccer team wanted to use it. But I saw this was like the year that Casey Printers was the bee's knees, and I ran back to the house with the dog, and Craig was at work. I grabbed his football out of his room, and I ran it back to the practice, and I got a hold of Casey Printers. There was no security. Again, it's the CFL. So I just walked the dog right onto the field, right up to Casey as he was taking reps. And I said, hey, sign this football. And Craig was mad at me. He was not happy.
Did he? Why would he want a pristine CFL football just to look at?
Well, no, we were throwing it around every day. We were using it. So he was mad that now we couldn't play catch with it anymore. And he was a Dave Dickinson man.
Did he never see Sandlot?
I guess not.
You don't throw the
baby Ruthie.
Oh, Jesus H. I have quite enjoyed the Toronto versus Boston series. Austin Matthews is becoming he's becoming a playoff performer. He's got 6 points. He's got 5 goals in 6 games. The other guy, Brad Marchand, is just a ridiculously talented hockey player. I just love watching him play when he's not doing anything stupid. Dave, are you shaking your head?
No, but I'm waiting for Paulie to slap you.
I'm not even listening. I'm watching the game at this point.
Listen, let's just go on about how good Brad Marchand is. He is an upstanding member of the NHL Players Association. Great guy, clean as a whistle.
I'm going to hang up the phone. I swear to God. Here's the problem. Now, I watched that game like we got off topic, and it was a tremendous hockey game. It was a great hockey game. I actually think that's been the best series in terms of television viewership with the drama, and there's real feeling behind it. But I hate both teams just so goddamn much. As a Canuck fan, I can't root for Boston, and as a Canadian not from Toronto, I can't root for Toronto. So all I take solace in is that they're tiring themselves out, and Columbus is going to smash whoever's left over in this next series.
I am very curious about what Columbus is going to do because they held a inter-squad scrimmage today in front of like 7,000 fans at Nationwide.
Oh, wow.
And
the Buckeye football hasn't started when?
Yeah, well, it's a Monday. Hopefully it must be a stat down there too. But I'm really curious to see what this layoff is going to do for this team.
It might get some bodies healthy, but it might be rust. We don't know. Maybe Matt Duchene, wakes up and realizes that he's Matt Duchene and not Matt Duchene 6 years ago, like he's looked like. So, he probably had a busy Easter. He's got the new baby, which he Instagrams the hell out of.
But I, off the top of the show, we talk about how important momentum is, and to enter the first round of the playoffs, you need to have momentum. You got to be cooking. If all of a sudden you take 10 days off or whatever it is in Columbus's case, is that? I'm really curious to see what game 1 against, whatever banged up yet energetic Toronto or Boston team they face is going to look like.
I think that starting on the road is going to suit them just fine. I think that they won't feel the pressure to come out of the gate like super hot to get the fans like into it. They can kind of like weather that storm in the first 10 minutes and shake off the ring rust without feeling like, there's a lot of pressure to do something. Mm-hmm. You just play the rope-a-dope for the first 10 minutes and hope Bob stops everything. And because he's a great goalie, he might. Or you give up 3 and you come back and win the game like they did in the last series. But I actually think with all the hype around them and then with the long layoff, I think starting off on the road it works to their advantage.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you. Plus, they're not going to get spooked by that damn cannon.
No, exactly. And and who's really afraid of going into Toronto and trying to steal a hockey game? Honestly,
it ain't hard to do.
They're all so young and fresh-faced looking. They're not very intimidating. Although Austin Matthews is starting to look a little haggard. He's looking so much more professional these days that he's going to change the O to an I. He gets a proper first name. I need to eat, and then I'm on duty to take something away from somebody.
Okay, well then we'll let you go.
But it's been a slice, and like I said, I haven't been gone. I've just been silently listening the whole time.
Okay, so you'll just continue silently listening, and then if you have something to say, you'll just chime in again.
That's right, yeah. Kind of like Paul in this episode.
Exactly.
All right, bud. See you later.
All right, see you guys later. Bye.
We didn't even say Gita's not watching or listening silently. She's not on the show this week.
She's not here?
No. It's not like Dave where he's always connected, but she's in Oregon right now. Hey, midway point of the show, make sure you go subscribe to our Pucks on Net email newsletter. And you can do that by heading over to pucksonet.ca and make sure you subscribe for all our jazz. Paul, I got a good question for you, and that's how dangerous are the Colorado Avalanche going to be next year?
Next year?
Because, I mean, they have been fantastic to watch. They're the most top-heavy team in the league, and that was their big concern going into the playoffs, is that they were a one-line team, much like Boston, allegedly.
I mean, you've said that all season, and I've always been like, well, there's a lot of guys below the top three that are good players, but a lot of them are youngsters, so it's, they're still waiting to see if they can take the next step, and in the playoffs, a lot of them have. You've seen good efforts from your JT Compfers and your Kerfoots, and they've got the 4th overall pick in the draft again this year, so not only do they have Cale Makar that's just showing up as free money in the playoffs, they're going to add another potential quick impact guy that maybe not jump in next year, but within the next 2 years they'll have another, hopefully, high impact something.
Yeah. God, they're dangerous. I remember I watched their Game 5 against Calgary. It was just methodical. Like, their power play was just methodical. The most patient, strategic thing I've. It reminded me of the Canucks in 2011 in that San Jose series, where it wasn't if, it was when. And I really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed watching the Avalanche this year, the Colorado Avalanche, and it's been I've been quite enjoying them.
Underrated team, and when they've had some bad seasons, it's because they're a young team, but it's a team built on skill, good goaltending. They had Varlamov, who's had success, and then they were able to get Grubauer out of Washington, and he's been even better, to the point where they'll let Varlamov go in the summer in all likelihood.
On the subject of goaltending, Mike McKenna, who it was once a Canucks property, now he's a Flyers property, and at the time one time another a Sens property. Basically, he's getting all the jerseys for his rumpus room. He chimed in on Fleury letting in that muffin of a hurdle shot last night in overtime, where he said that because everyone thought it was just a clean shot, and Mike McKenna's like, no, his stick was tied up with whoever the defender was for Vegas' stick, causing the puck to change trajectory. And, Fleury read it perfectly, but because it hit 2 sticks collided, it went through the 5-hole. And basically Twitter was telling a professional NHL caliber goalie what he was saying was wrong, and he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, that's Twitter. Anytime there's a deflection shot, it's hard to fault the goalies. Like, even one of the few things I give Don Cherry credit for is when he talks about defensemen getting their stick in on a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's great if they can deflect it wide, but when they don't, you're just changing the angle up, and the goalie misses it half the time if you deflect it on net. It's
also pretty bad when it's in double overtime and your team's shorthanded and you got to go back to the Shark Tank.
That is one of the worst times to do it. Yeah, I feel like the Knights have been the better team in that series, but the Sharks have been good at times and good enough to win half the games. And now it's anybody's. Like, you never know what happens in a Game 7 situation, and the Shark Tank is a very volatile place. I've heard in the playoffs this year there have been some complaints about Sharks fans harassing
Golden
Knights fans.
Yeah.
And I've been to that arena, and
that only happens in San Jose. That doesn't happen in Philadelphia or Vancouver.
Oh, no,
it's every fans are just very peaceful-minded people.
I was trying to set up, like, I met some really nice people. Like, it was right after Manny Malhotra had come over to Vancouver from San Jose, right after he had his eye injury the season before, and a bunch of fans around me and my friends were all wearing Vancouver Canucks stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, how's Manny? How's he doing? Oh, it's good to see you folks out. I hope you have a good time. I did get the stink eye from some people and a couple of, like,
pun intended,
stupid, heckles type of thing, but, like, no more than any other arena. But I imagine, come playoff time, even just being on Twitter,
mm-hmm.
Last season I had Knights people tweeting at me because I was tweeting, not even cheering one side on in the last couple rounds so much, just like... I'd make a point, and they'd be like, "How dare you be so anti-Knights?" And I'm like, "What did I even say?"
You sound like a national broadcaster who's being accused of being a Leaf hater and or a Bruin lover and a Leaf hater. And
somebody brought attention to that again this week, that the CBC is or Sportsnet, I guess, is simultaneously 2 pro Bruins and 2 pro Leafs.
Yeah,
in their series. I mean, you get that almost anytime you get a.
But Paul, that's Canada's team.
Who, the Bruins? I don't know how Don Cherry hasn't lost his mind because those are his 2 teams. How can he choose a winner? How can he be biased on one side of that conversation? That's his bread and butter. If he can't be, taking one side too much.
Well, he's so stressed out, right? And that's why when you see him speak on live television, he seems, nervous or flabbergasted, or you can't understand what he's saying at times. It's never like that any other time, any other Saturday. It's just during the Boston Bruins, and he doesn't know who to cheer for. So that's why
there you go.
You might see some negative because, October through March, he's a very eloquent speaker who every coach's corner, he brings a very concise.
All right, you're taking this one too far.
Am I? All right, let's go.
It was funny at first. You don't need the full 2-minute setup.
Well, Coach's Corner is 6 minutes. So I figured I would just go for 6 minutes.
I guess, yeah, if you're trying out for CBC.
Not a bad idea. Out of town scoreboard, we have a 1-1 tie in Carolina between the Capitals and the Carolina Hurricanes.
Yeah, no,
it's captivated both of us. This is a series I don't really care too much about.
I mean,
I have it falling under the Nashville-Dallas umbrella of
fine with either.
Just give me the second round.
I picked Washington, so I guess I want to get a couple of series right.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've only gotten one right so far in the first round.
Did you do a bracket challenge for
Yeah,
NHL?
I did one of the mainly just to record my picks because I didn't broadcast them on Twitter or anything this year.
Mm-hmm.
I picked Colorado. I think I've been wrong in every other series.
Oh, okay. So at least you did pick Colorado. Looking back with what we know now, I probably wouldn't have picked Calgary, but they were, good and resilient and would win games in the third period, and goaltending didn't matter.
They were the favorite to win, but yeah, I don't know.
They're putting you to sleep right now.
A little bit.
Okay, because in my bracket challenge, and I printed mine out at work to annoy people. I also printed it and I put it up and I put it next to my menu for that restaurant Trans Am that serves a $21 burger.
Yeah, I heard you offended your suburbs-dwelling coworkers.
Absolutely.
By telling them you paid $20 for a hamburger.
Yeah, so I put that up, and then right next to it I put my bracket challenge just to here's all your talking points.
Do people actually come by your desk
on Monday?
That often?
Sometimes. I think they know by now
and
to just leave me be.
They pay that much attention that they get all worked up over what you choose to pin up on the wall?
I do have a reputation of being hockey guy now.
Okay.
And so I will walk past other departments, and this guys will go, "Hey, how about that game last night?" And I'll have to go and I'll have to regurgitate things that we've said on the show.
I'm sure you hate that, being known as the sports guy and expert.
I don't like it because I'm not an expert. They just say things, bop, 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 and then I have to go, well, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah, Toronto, yeah,
Well, there you go. That's half your workday. You're making money.
That's 4 or 5 hours right
people.
there, yeah. Okay, so with all these upsets, do you have in mind a legitimate choice to win the Stanley Cup this year? Because you go through it.
Like who do I pick at this point?
Yeah. Do you have somebody that you could say, well, Columbus made quick work of Tampa Bay, but they're sitting around, and they're sitting around all this time. They have to play another team that's still red hot. You could say Colorado looked so good against the best, or St. Louis, who's been firing on all cylinders since January. But do you have a team right now that you could say, yeah, they could win the Stanley Cup?
No, I mean, if I've learned anything watching playoff hockey, especially in recent years, it really is a week-to-week sort of thing where a team is at. You guys were talking about St. Louis and Winnipeg earlier, and as much as you might complain about the lack of effort that some people perceived from the Jets players,
yeah,
a lot of that had to do, I said going into it, I wouldn't want to be the team that ends up playing St. Louis.
Oh, absolutely
And
not.
I picked the Jets to win that one just because I thought, okay, well, just going odds on, St. Louis is potentially could win that series. I said it would go to 7. They didn't need that much. But yeah, there's something to be said about teams that hit their stride at the right time. And St. Louis was an underachieving team. Like, you guys made fun of me at the fantasy draft because I picked like 3 or 4 Blues or something for my team.
But they're so boring, Paul. They're not going to achieve anything.
And I ended up dropping a couple of them who picked it up as soon as I did so.
You're welcome,
But I'm just
St.
saying,
Louis.
it's a team going into the season. I'm looking down the lineup, and there's a lot of good, talented guys, like a Jaden Schwartz, who just now seems to be coming back from the injury he suffered, what was that, 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, where all of a sudden he was a huge part of that series' first-round win. And,
I think he had a big game.
He had a big game near the end of it.
Might have had a hat trick.
But there's a lot of guys like that where you look up and down the lineup and you go, if enough of them can get it together at the right time and gel, that is an amazing lineup. And they needed a goalie, and
they pulled one out of their
summoned
ass.
one out of nowhere, and he's been fantastic. So they're a team that could continue on that stride. You look even like the 93-94 Canucks weren't that great, but they hit their stride late in the season. Had a lot of underachieving guys that year, but young players that were just the year before took a good step up. I guess 92 and 93 better years for the Canucks, but the Blues could be that type of team, and Colorado is appearing to be that type of team as well.
The Blues remind me of the 8th place LA Kings that made quick work of the Canucks and then just proceeded to roll through the entire Western Conference and then sweep.
Yeah, and the 94 Canucks were a similar squad that just like they knew when to flip the switch.
Yeah.
Or they happened to flip the switch at the right time. But yeah, Columbus has got a great lineup. Nashville could still make it through. They always have a great lineup. If Las Vegas goes on, amazing. Like there's so many teams. San Jose, even if they can get enough of their guys achieving where they potentially can.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good teams, and I would struggle to. I don't like doing the brackets where you pick the whole playoffs at the beginning because, especially when you get to the conference final, depending on how many teams have been decimated by injuries and stuff, what are you doing picking that before the first round has even started? You can't,
Well, plus we all picked, Winnipeg and Tampa Bay to go to the finals. So regardless of whatever excuse, we look like idiots.
Oh,
either
yeah,
way.
100%. My finalists are both eliminated at this point.
I love that NHL has they're advertising now that you have a second chance.
There is a new bracket where you can start in round 2. Are they going to make people fill the whole bracket out through probably?
They have to guess correctly,
which is a bad way to do it. But anyway,
I love it. I don't know.
People have talked about reseeding, but so much of it is we're talking about like flipping the switch at the right time. Like a lot of teams near the top of the league would have picked a St. Louis potentially or a Carolina, and these teams are putting up a lot of fight.
Well, what if one of the things that they talked about at the GM meetings was the top teams picking their opponents?
Well, that's what. Yeah, and I'm sort of referencing. It's like, well, who would you have thought you had good odds against?
Columbus.
Yeah, Columbus would have been one of the teams.
Colorado, Dallas.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't mind the idea of pairing them off, like mixing conferences 1 versus 16. Like, why not? I don't have a real issue with it, but I don't think it's going to necessarily change that much. People will be shocked at some of the upsets that come to pass, and I don't know. Seeding in the playoffs is you can't predict anything.
Nobody predict. Well, I mean, yeah, you
can't predict who's going to play well against who at that time of year.
The only real huge upset is Columbus against Tampa Bay.
But even that one, Columbus had the firepower to at least put up a fight, but they were not gelling after the trade deadline when they picked up all those extra guns.
Cannons, if you will. A lot of firepower, a lot of cannon puns, a lot of wordplay. I like that. I just want to put that out there.
There you go.
But I mean, the Islanders are going into the playoffs hailed as the best the most defensively sound team in the NHL, and they looked incredible. The Avalanche had all that firepower, and St. Louis was the best team since New Year's. They've been playing the best. They were in last place on January 3rd, which is just gonna be beaten to death.
No one's ever done that before.
No. I'm very intrigued. Did you hear? Brian Boyle had his appendix removed, or an appendix procedure, like 6 days prior to him playing over the weekend.
I mean, it's the playoffs. You might only get 1 or 2 games, so yeah, you jump in. This isn't Patrick Laine in January who should have been treated and sat for a couple of months.
Did you have any idea when he started wearing that neck guard?
Who, Patrick Laine or Brian Boyle?
Brian Boyle's too tough to wear a neck guard, let's be honest.
I didn't know. That's not something I pay that much attention to.
Oh, they did a whole I think it was on Coach's Corner, but I'm like, what is he wearing? Like some old man sweater under there? And he wears like a bit of a dickie. That's a neck guard.
Oh, well, a lot of... It might be a necessity in a lot of junior leagues, I feel like.
And he might just be so used to it, he doesn't want to change things.
Well, it's one of those things that if it doesn't affect your play and it's extra protection so you don't wind up... I mean, in that case, like, I hate to bring it up, Clint Malarchuk... Yeah, I don't have a problem with like people that talk about visors or
I'm all for
extra protection or extra stuff, on your skates and shins type of, like, if it doesn't affect the way you play, put on as much armor as possible.
Oh, I know for me, like if I was playing the NHL, I mean, tomorrow I'd be like, can I have a neck guard just because my jugular's pretty exposed and you're sharpening these skates 4 times a game and I'm not that graceful, so just...
Well, and you got people like Tuukka Rask throwing blades across the ice. Like, it's just asking for trouble.
What else do we got here? Man, we did our Patreon show on Thursday afternoon, where we spent most of it talking about the Tampa Bay Lightning sweep, and you can head over to listen to that. But we mostly discussed how they're going to, sit with this shame and this regret and this disappointment all summer, and they'll learn from it and they'll grow from it. They'll grow from the adversity, and it'll be a character building. But I mean, it's pretty abysmal to watch. But
they should still have lots of a window. Winnipeg is a similar team. You hope your young guys learn from this after last year, feeling on top of the world to a certain extent.
Well, things just don't come easy in life. Like it's hard to be a lot of those Tampa Bay Lightning that just like, oh, we're the best team. Oh, we keep winning. Oh, man, we are scoring all the goals. Oh, the playoffs? Well, it's just a matter of time. And then you encounter somebody with a work ethic and a fiery passion that's playing for jobs and playing for livelihood.
Yeah, and say what you will about the effort or whatever that they showed.
Winnipeg?
Winnipeg or Tampa Bay. I was thinking Tampa Bay, but like in the end, you lost to an amazing hockey team. And as good as they were in the regular season, I don't know, it just keeps going back to, like you meet a team that hits their stride at the right time and has a lot of firepower themselves.
Yeah.
There's not, I don't know, I would say there's no shame in losing to a Columbus Blue Jackets or a St. Louis Blues in those two cases.
What team
shouldn't stop you from pushing forward, but it's a weird psychological middle ground you got to find where not happy, you think you could have given more, but at the same time, you can't beat yourself up that much because there's only one Stanley Cup champion in the end. And that's why I don't like people that just like shit on teams like they never won a Stanley Cup in their window. It's like, well, there's a lot of good hockey teams in the league and only one every year gets to claim that championship.
Well, if you think about it, with all the momentum that the question mark teams had going into it, on as well as all the legitimately very good hockey teams in the playoff that made the playoffs, there aren't exactly any like shameful loss teams. Like even the situation is wild, but I mean they lost. The Tampa Bay Lightning lost to a really good, really stacked Columbus Blue Jackets team. The Pittsburgh Penguins, who are getting old and losing their window, lost to a rolling and completely dominant and completely smart defensive team that's led by a great coach. So it's like, I can't think of a team or a matchup or a loss that's happened already like now that's already happened that is shameful, that has that Colorado Minnesota vibe to it from way back in the day that retired Patty Roy. Like I don't, it might be upsetting that it took 4 games, but there's no shame in losing to any of the teams in the playoffs this year.
And different people, they draw the line in the sand for where shame, quote unquote shame, should come into play.
That's us, by the way.
No, and I think we're a little more easygoing and understanding on these teams that are putting up. I think all 16 teams that made the playoffs were solid hockey teams. There's a couple that just missed the playoffs that are solid hockey teams.
Even if Arizona made the playoffs, they would have that momentum and that work ethic going into it, and they would only get healthier because they dealt with injuries all year. So it's almost like if you were in the fight, maybe Montreal was kind of flip-flopping, and they got eliminated on the second last day. There's one team I could think of that would have replaced Columbus or Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, they overachieved all season. It's one of those things where they may have been able to take some of that David and Goliath, and there are a lot of players on that team that if they're all going full steam ahead, and you can say that about pretty much any team, whoever can get more players on their roster to reach their potential or even exceed it a little bit are probably going to win the series, like if they're the team that does that relative to the team they're playing.
It's like you and Dave said about Calgary. When they didn't have a number one all-star goalie to play in front of, and that affects the team positively and or negatively. And the same could be said if the Montreal Canadiens made the playoffs. If Carey Price gets hot and has a great game one, that team's walking around with an entirely different attitude, an entirely different mentality, and a lot more confidence.
Yeah, they know that he can save them if they're going all-out offense to get more goals than they probably should be if they're playing better defensively. Yeah, it's a weird head game. And I do think Calgary's not that far off. Like, add a goalie, maybe change a body here or there. Obviously, Neil wasn't a good investment we talked about, but almost every team has a signing or two that they regret like that, and Calgary can probably survive that one. We'll see if they can, minimize the loss, move him, or get something. He could come back next year and have a good season. Like, he's the type of guy, too. He's had a bit of an ups and downs to his career. You never know what you're going to get out of a guy like that when he comes back after a summer off that's longer than he wanted it to be and started with some scratching in the playoffs, which he's not used to.
Well, what's sad is that he was fixing to be our generation's Marian Hossa. You go to a team, you lose in the Stanley Cup Finals. You go to another team, you lose in the Stanley Cup Finals. Third time's a charm for Marian Hossa in Chicago. And now he's now just our generation's James Neal, and nobody likes James Neal.
I think some people do.
Probably.
I feel like we have some listeners who like anyone who ever played for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
No, that era of Pittsburgh. We discussed this on the Patreon.
Is that too long ago? The Pittsburgh fans don't even remember James Neal now?
No, because when you win back-to-back Stanley Cups in a modern era, you forget quickly about... You call them the Thomas Volkun era Pittsburgh Penguins. I refer to it as the real deal James Neal Pittsburgh Penguins. But just that real dark age between... The dark time between the David Steckel elbow to Sidney Crosby to when they traded for Phil Kessel and they won the Stanley Cup that following year. That's about 4 or 5 years of just dark, miserable time for Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, they were only just like a really entertaining team that didn't have as much playoff success as they'd like. And still beat the Washington Capitals every year, usually. I don't remember. I haven't.
No, you're right.
It's so long ago.
I don't even think they made the playoffs every year.
Yeah, they were a good team, but yeah, people thought they should have won more Stanley Cups. And again, it's like one of those.
Well, you should win the Stanley Cup every year.
There are a lot of good teams that make the playoffs, and you're not going to win it every year in today's NHL. And if you can win more than 2 in a row like Pittsburgh did, that'll be as dynasty as we'll ever see if a team can pull that off in the next 10, 20 years.
We spent a lot of this podcast talking about hot goalies, and we're not talking about their looks because looks are subjective. And whatever goalie PMAC you may find the hottest, I might disagree with you.
Is this setting up the Vezina conversation?
No, I wanted to ask you who you thought the sexiest goalie was. That's our Vezina trophy.
Is it still Henrik Lundqvist? I feel like he's held that title for a lot of
years.
All
right. Well,
he's going to the World Championships. He's splitting the net with Jacob Markstrom.
Was Marky going?
Yeah, and apparently Anders Nilsson has been invited to be their third.
Who were you talking to?
What?
About Anders Nilsson.
Oh,
did you
I
talk
talked
to some again?
Not this year.
Okay, so they are going off of your positive review from years past.
Did you see Anders Nilsson play behind that Ottawa Senators team?
Yeah, he got them all the way
to 31st. He looked fantastic. It's not about where you finish in the standings when you're evaluating players.
I know.
He looked great behind an awful garbage dump of a team.
you could maybe get
He
that.
was one of the few bright spots.
Yeah, and he could maybe get that. He looked like he had his confidence back, and he could get that Jacob Markstrom approach or that effect to him. Find your game at a later age.
Markstrom played behind a debatably comparable team and put up similar performances that people, think he's going to be the starter going into the World Championships because he put up better numbers than Lundqvist and is 10 years younger.
I just realized that we skipped something. So we already answered hottest goalie, but Steve Yzerman,
yes,
stepped down as his role as general manager and whatever of the Tampa Bay Lightning after 9 years, where he completely revitalized and turned that team right around.
Was he in charge for 9 years?
He was there 9 years, according to the press release from.
He was in the organization. Probably. I don't think he was GM for 9. I could be wrong.
He started as an advisor to Ken Holland in 2006, I believe. That was what it said.
But I mean, did he start as the general manager?
No, he was like an assistant or an advisor, like how Brett Hull started with Dallas. But he went home. He stepped down very oddly at the beginning of the season, where he's like, well, this team's perfect. I got to go. I'll see you later. I don't need any more Stanley Cup rings. So Steve Yzerman was smart to step away from this team that is just riddled in failure and miserable results.
President's Trophy.
Yeah, and there's
people
probably
hate that. We're from Vancouver. We know how much people hate the President's Trophy.
Stupid trophy. But they're going to win like 7 other trophies at the NHL Awards this year. But he steps on. He's now the general manager and executive vice president and the general manager responsible for all hockey operations in Detroit.
As people speculated from 4 years ago.
Yeah, and then it came out last year or this year that he actually still lived in Detroit and he would commute to Tampa, which, I mean, that's not the longest flight, but it ain't exactly a nice trip. And then somehow Ken Holland, who is giving kind of ambiguous responses. Is ambiguous the word?
Well, let's hear what you're going to say.
Well, he's like, he doesn't know where his future is. He's going to remain as a senior VP, and he's a senior advisor to hockey ops. So Steve Yzerman went in there, and it's like, who should be the GM? It should be me, not this guy that's been here for 22 years. Yeah,
I mean, well, this is how you push older guys in an organization out of the way somewhat respectfully, where you move them over to another position, and then they are open to take jobs elsewhere, but they still have a job wherever they are.
Now, we should chime in and say that Ken Holland wasn't fired, so this isn't an Edmonton Oilers situation.
Some people are phrasing it as he was promoted.
Sure he was. Yeah.
Which
Senior.
No, I mean it's obviously garbage. That's the word of the day, I guess. But it's one of those situations where I saw some people getting defensive when people were throwing out, well, maybe Ken Holland goes here now. Maybe he goes here. And then people were jumping at them, Wings fans mostly. Mm-hmm. He just signed an extension. He's not going anywhere.
Yep.
But if you know anything about the hockey world, anytime you have one of these guys in any position other than the general manager, maybe president, but even then, they have the ability to ask their supervisor, boss, owner usually, I guess, for their role, if they can negotiate with other teams. And he's in that position now where he's not out of a job, but if he gets an offer from somewhere else, the Wings are not going to stop him from doing an interview and moving on. That's what they've set him up to do, it looks like now. Or he could retire. He's got more than enough money, I'm sure. It's how long he wants to stay in the game.
How long is he in his promotion to assistant to the general manager?
How long do I expect it to last?
They need a couple guys. They need a general manager in Edmonton. They need a GM. I think he's the only vacancy right now.
Yeah, and people throwing out Seattle as a potential spot to have a guy like him in. I don't know if you have a Seattle, if you bring him in as the GM, because he's still a bit of an old school hockey guy. Mm-hmm. A lot of people have been critical that he's sort of one of the dinosaurs as far as GMs are concerned, and a lot of these new organizations are looking for someone who's not even a numbers guy, but someone who just accepts more of a wide variety of methods. But he's the type of guy you could bring in as a team president in Seattle with a lot of money. Yeah, Ottawa was looking at Trevor Linden, allegedly. And that's the type of thing, if you're looking for team president, honestly, as long as they sort of understand the game, They don't have to be like the center of attention. They're not making all the decisions. They might be an advisor in the room as deals are being cut, but he could take on a responsibility like that. And a lot of people have thrown out Canucks rumors because I think he's from Eastern BC, isn't he?
He's from
the
Penticton
Kootenays or Penticton or something. I mean, technically so is Steve Yzerman, although like he was born out here in
Cranbrook,
but he grew up in Ontario, so I mean, it's a little different.
Yeah, he was he was in Cranbrook for about 45 seconds. He was in Cranbrook as long as Ken Holland is going to be the assistant to the general manager in Detroit.
There you go.
But I mean, if he's a little old school, there's a handful of fired GMs running the show in Edmonton right now that don't want to hire Mike Gillis. So Ken Holland could be perfect for that Edmonton Oilers job.
Because he's not Mike Gillis.
Yeah. Oh, we don't like what he did with who was the player? I think it was Mike Sillinger or something. That was what came out, that they were still upset about the way that Gillis as an agent or negotiated with the Oilers organization, which is perfect and peak Edmonton.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I don't know. Did Ken Holland ever play for the Edmonton Oilers?
No, Ken Holland also inherited a hell of a good situation.
He did. Did his brother ever play for the Oilers? Like I'm like, those are key things when you're being hired in Edmonton.
Did Ken Holland himself play for the Oilers?
Well, that was the first question. Did he play there or did his brother play there? But he is like a Chiarelli. Like he was the GM of a Original Six, somewhat successful franchise for some of his career tenure.
I got it. I figured it out in Edmonton. I know exactly who they need. He just retired. He just stepped down. Bring him out of retirement. They love doing that in Edmonton. They get Glenn Sather. What do you say to that? And then they say the Alberta government, they changed the indoor smoking laws so he can smoke his cigar inside instead of just chomping on it.
Why don't you just bring him on as head coach? Just back to his roots.
He did it once, but he won all those cups before. He can do it again.
Anyway, it's an interesting, also in the Detroit thing, it's an interesting precedent to set because now all the people in Vancouver will be clamoring for Jim Benning to be promoted to team president and head of scouting or something so someone else can slide into the GM's job.
Please, for the love of God, promote Jim Benning to assistant to the general manager. That's all I want. Head scout.
Well, no, it would be
head scout.
Give him the job as president.
You really want him being your PR man?
But if you're hiring a new GM, make it so like he doesn't have to go through his president and then hide the a lot of presidents don't do anything if they're not also the GM of hockey teams. It's more of the like in-house staffing, not the on-ice staffing. Like presidents, I don't know, they're figurehead position.
Do you think
depends on the organization, I'm sure.
Do you think Jimbo's going to figure this out? This pyramid scheme we got going on? This Ponzi scheme?
Yeah, I mean, if people keep tweeting about it, he might see it. Somebody may slap some of those tweets on his felt board.
Maybe we should stop talking about this. He's probably listening.
He's probably listening.
I'm a president now. I answer to nobody. Nobody also answers to me.
Are you trying to quote Kevin from The Office?
No, what did he do?
When me president, me something something. I can't remember what he did. It was when he was trying to say fewer words. They had some quote that was like, when me president,
you all
see, you all see, or something like that.
Finally, the Vezina Trophy candidates came out. Naturally so. They are Andrei Vasilevsky, Tampa Bay Lightning, who had an amazing year. Robin Lehner, who I believe, is it the Masterton? He's going to win it. There's nobody else that should win it. And he had an amazing year with the Islanders. He could have a running for the Vezina. And then the third candidate, obviously, is Ben Bishop.
See, it's funny. I think Ben Bishop, from my perspective of those three, is the most deserving.
Do you really think so?
But I also think Marc-Andre Fleury should be on that list. Well, he was the one we were all saying, like, he'll probably be runner-up for the Hart Trophy. Wouldn't it be wild if he's not nominated for the Vezina but gets a nomination for the Hart Trophy? It goes back to I keep talking about it from like 20 years ago. Jose Theodore almost won the Hart Trophy the same year that Patrick Waugh won the Vezina, which, if you're going by definition of trophies, probably should have happened that year.
Yeah.
And it could be the same type of thing this year, even at least with nominations. Yeah, I just mean Ben Bishop, when he was healthy, was one of the top shutout guys all year. So those are numbers. That's the type of number when you look at limited games, but you're still putting up that type of performance. You're like, okay, you know what? It's hard to fault the guy for his injuries.
I'm curious to see what the final voting is, because if
Yeah.
Ben Bishop, let's say he had, I don't know, 25.4% of the votes, Marc-Andre Fleury will have like 25.2% of the votes. Like it's got to be microscopic, because he had an incredible year where that's why he was one of the big. I mean, sure, we talk about how stacked the Golden Knights are, but he had his best year in terms of his numbers.
They didn't look good when he wasn't in the lineup.
Mm-hmm. So that is more of a Hart Trophy debate. Have the finalists have been announced for that yet?
No, I think they're doing it again where they'll do like one every day or two for 2 weeks or something. So, yeah, I don't have any problem, honestly, with any three of those guys. It's not a matter of putting them down. It's like, I kind of just assumed Marc-Andre Fleury would be there, but he's also in the Western Conference, and there are more voters, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't looked at the list in a while. In the Eastern Conference, you see two of the candidates coming out of there, and even Ben Bishop's guy playing in a market that's Central Time, so you're still going to see a lot of him out east.
Yeah.
But Dallas had two great goaltenders. New York, the Islanders had two great goaltenders this year. It'll be interesting to see how many teams try to go 50-50 in the future, especially seeing two of the candidates for the Vezina be two guys that were part of that system, albeit ones that took over the job come playoff time. But I mean, even Carolina, we're watching the game right now. Peter Mrazek has taken over, but they went alternating almost every other game for most of the season between Mrazek and McElhinney.
Well, the Toronto media will not let Curtis McElhinney get any sort of...
How is Freddie Anderson not up? Every time I tune into Sportsnet,
he's the best.
Someone
goalie.
talks about how he is the best goalie in the league, and I don't think he's a bad goalie, but I'm always shocked when they say that. I'm like, looks good, but there are a lot of good goalies in the league.
Kelly Rudy sort of gets like sexually attracted or aroused to showing Freddie Anderson replays or clips. He's like, look at him. He never takes his eyes off the puck. I'm getting a little excited just watching this. And I'm like, he's being a goalie. He's being a good goalie. He's not Carey Price, where his goals against is the most minuscule playoff number ever, where nobody can score against him. And then Freddie Anderson will give up 6 goals in a game. It's like, wow, just
everyone has those nights.
Yeah, I mean, everybody.
I mean, who have they had in Toronto in recent memory that's played to that level? So I can understand why Toronto guys see a lot of Toronto stuff. It's like us with Jacob Markstrom this year all of a sudden. Although Ryan Miller was pretty good behind bad Canucks teams too.
No. We realized Ryan Miller was good 2 years too late.
Hey, I was wondering, Mike Smith is the type of guy. I talked about it a few weeks ago. I was trying to come up with an example, and I came up with Roberto Luongo. And we were talking about the situation in Florida anyway, being a backup to like a young goalie that you don't maybe 100% trust yet, to be a mentor, but also a backup come playoff time if you need someone. Could you see Mike Smith going in to a San Jose and playing behind a Jones? We talked about how they might need one of those guys, or one of those markets anyway, where you have a young goalie who's very good, very talented. Obviously, in the last game that is pushing that series to 7 games, Jones looked great.
Yeah.
But Anaheim went out and picked up Ryan Miller, partly because he wanted to live in that area, but partly because they go, Johnny Gibson, great guy, not a lot of doubt in him, but you want to have an old, Vezina winner, ideally.
Did he win a Vezina?
He won in like 2010 with Buffalo, I feel like.
Mike Smith?
No, sorry, Ryan Miller.
Mike Smith never won a Vezina.
I don't believe so, but he's been nominated.
Yeah, he's had years, but I think he's still at a point in his career where he's so angry and fiery that he only wants to be a starter.
He'll want to be a starter, but how many teams are going to offer him a starter job, and how many teams would he actually want to play for that would offer him a starter's job? Like, I feel like his best bet would be to gracefully bow out but get another 3 or 4 years in the league, potentially even like a Ryan Miller, by taking one of these contracts late in his career and just being like, I'll ride the pine. If somebody gets hurt, I'm in for a month. That'll be great.
He's not going to do it this year because I think that he's stubborn enough that he still thinks he could be a number 1 based on how it wasn't him that underperformed in the playoffs. Based on the team in front of him, he actually looked okay. And I think that he's not at that point where he can realize, okay, I'm not what I used to be. I need to reevaluate my options. Like, I don't think he's at that Roberto Luongo, I just want to be a backup thing. He could be.
I don't think he's maybe there psychologically, but he might have to be come September, October. Free agent. We'll see who offers him a job. I think his best bet, if he wants starts, is to find a team that wants to do the 50-50 thing. And San Jose might be one of those places that's willing to go 50-50 with a Jones and a Smith or something and just ride the hot hand come playoff time and be quick to jump to the next one. That's probably his best. But I don't see many teams offering Mike Smith their starter's job because he couldn't even hold it in Calgary this year.
Plus,
and
nobody
Calgary
really
didn't
likes
have
him.
anyone. I know some people are big Riddick fans, but he didn't have a lot of, competition for the job, and he still lost it for a good chunk of the season.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, that's something that stuck out to me because I do think he's good, and I do think he could contribute. But, maybe that's Colorado. Maybe they swap goalies in free agency. Varlamov goes to Calgary because he's better than Smith. Smith heads in and plays 35 games behind Grubauer, and maybe he jumps in come playoff time and wins them a cup. Like, it's good to have that second body. They're going to need a backup. I don't know if they have a prospect they're ready to bring up, but Grubauer's young.
Hopefully he figures out and becomes there psychologically by July 1st after an up-and-coming team potentially wins the Stanley Cup that has a backup role for him.
It'll be fun to see where some of these dominoes fall come July 1st and the following days. And there probably will be a few guys. Mike Smith is one that might not sign anywhere until mid-July or August because they're looking for the right situation and don't like the first few options that pop up.
Yeah, we'll have to. It'll be a wait-and-see scenario. Sorry, I'm just doing multitasking here.
That's what you always do.
I know, but I lost my place. I think that's going to wrap it up for this week's podcast. We did get a question.
Okay.
That was more. Kevin is one of our very few listeners. That's a Arizona Coyotes fan, passionate Arizona Coyotes fan. So hopefully he enjoyed our discussions about what a good goalie Mike Smith is or how they could have competed in the playoffs. But he basically asks if Stevie Y signed Yanni Gourde to big money so that because he knew he was going to Detroit, so that he could offer sheet Braden Point and have his rebuild around him. So I love his tinfoil hat conspiracy theory approach to the game. That being said, yes, that's exactly what Steve Yzerman did. I can confirm that. He's sabotaging it from the inside, and I'm sure, Paul, you have everything, but you have nothing but similar thoughts to share with me.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just getting a call from Tyson Chicken. Let me check. I've heard this before from people that usually look in hindsight at some GM who's switched teams, and they go, oh, I bet he did that on purpose. He's that smart. And it's like, hey, you know what? No, I don't see that happening. What I can see, he obviously will have a good relationship, you'd think, with the people in Tampa if they can help each other out. Tampa's going to need to unload some bodies.
He won't have a good relationship with Jonathan Drouin. We know that.
He's not in Tampa anymore. So it is what it is. But I could see as Tampa needs to unload some bodies, move some things around, they might sell low to a Detroit Red Wings now because of that relationship. I could see that. But yeah, I don't think it's a conspiracy thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, he knows the ins and outs of the team too. So if there's a free agency thing to take advantage of, he'll be extremely aware of anyone coming out of Tampa or RFAs that might be offer sheetable or whatever.
And what if he offer sheets Braden Point?
You mean like would that affect the relationship of the organization?
No, would you be like, huh, that's interesting?
Like I said, I would attribute it more to he's familiar with the people and the situation and will be able to take advantage of it.
No collusion.
Well, I basically said they may collude by giving him some players if something needs to be sold at a loss.
That's what the Detroit Red Wings Twitter account is just going to start saying. They're going to have a press release and then comma, no collusion, comma, and then
right after this podcast drops, just like when they lost in the playoffs, there's that quick, we are so sorry tweet. There's instantly going to be a reaction from their social media team. No collusion, all caps.
Well, there's no collusion that this is the end of this week's podcast. I want to thank you for getting... Oh, man, now that Dave's not back on... Sorry, now that Dave's silent again, I'm going to have to bring up the soundboard. We want to thank you for downloading us wherever you get us from.
Arizona, by example.
Yup.
I'm excited to see what Schmaltz can do when he's healthy again.
Mm-hmm.
Don't tell Dave, though.
No, he is...
He does not like Schmaltz.
He's a strong man.
I like them both.
They're both very good players. I want to make sure you follow us on Twitter. I want to remind you to make sure you follow us on Twitter at pucksonnet.ca or pucksonnet.ca. And again, if you want to support the show monetarily, if you want to, you really like what you're listening to, you want a little bit more content, you can head on over to patreon.com/pucksonnet, where you can pledge just that, like we always say, a couple of bucks. And $5 a month, a $5 monthly pledge will get you instant access to our 5 minutes for paying segments we do every week. We just did a good bonus episode on Tuesday. There's a teaser on the podcast feed. If you want a little sample of that, basically it's just me and PMAC riffing. Usually it's a lot of Q&As, and we had a really good show on Thursday about the Tampa Bay Lightning being swept, and then some strangely compelling office discussions, comparisons to NHL players. So that's patreon.com/pucksonnet. And if you don't want to give us any money, a couple ways to support the show. You can go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes in the iTunes Store. Give us a positive rating. Give us a positive review. 5 stars will usually suffice. We're also available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, literally anywhere you get your podcasts, even on the dark web. We are once again back on the dark web, Paul.
I don't want to be on this podcast anymore.
Okay, well, you're definitely not going to want to be on it when you see what's happened down in the dark web.
Is that just what you call your basement?
Yeah, that's where I do
Those
my laundry.
cassette tapes that you pass out to your fellow people that live in the building?
I say, hey, check this out. It's a good show.
Check out my mixtape.
It's just our show.
Drop it like it's hot.
So best way, just tell a friend and let them know about us, about this here show. And head on over to pucksonnet.ca, subscribe to our email newsletter. That's a great way to support the show. You get 1 email a week on Fridays that outlines all the content we've done. The email I put on Friday, Paul, was a mile long. We put out a lot of stuff this last week or so.
Yep. Ryan likes writing. Be sure to subscribe and read his writing. Yeah, he transcribes it. He writes it on typewriter first.
Yes, if you would like a transcription of this week's Pucks on Net, send $45 to Palatial Estate Boulevard, Vancouver, British Columbia. Please don't ask for a transcribed version of this podcast. I don't have that much time on my hands.
He doesn't even listen back to edit at the end most weeks. So.
I got to edit this week. I had to move the coffee table.
That's true. Tune in next week. Same Pucks on Net channel. Same Pucks on Net time.
Although we might be recording on Saturday.
I mean,
I might put it out on Sunday.
Whatever.